If you're anything like me, you just watched the new season of Arcane, which left you equal parts in awe and in tears. And I don't know about you, but the first thought I had when I finished it was, I need more where that came from. Maybe you thought, wait a minute, this banger show is actually based on a video game. What if I install the game and try it? Then this video is for you. I'll tell you everything you need to know before playing League of Legends for the first time. Whether you want to recreate some of the punching that Vi did, or whether you want to feel like a sniper playing Caitlyn. You might say a lot about League of Legends, but one thing nobody will disagree with is that there's a character that will suit you. But the thing is, the beginner-friendly material out there is scarce, and sometimes scary or complicated, or too shallow and leaving more questions than answers. This video will give you just the right amount of information and guidance to start your awesome League journey, and even see if you want to trade it in the first place. Hello everyone, my name is Sagittarius and I've been playing League of Legends for well over 13 years, 3 of which I've been a professional freelance coach, and I do coach a lot of beginner students that are coming back into a game after many years or playing for the first time. Because of this experience, I do think that this video will help you a lot because my idea is condensing all the things that the beginner players ask me and put it in one video. We are gonna start with the basics of League of Legends and how it works. So first, what is League of Legends anyway? The first thing you gotta know about League of Legends, if you're coming from watching Arcane, is that League is nothing like Arcane. The characters are the same, and we call them champions in League of Legends, but the game itself is not story-driven, but rather you play individual matches over and over in the same map. We have over 160 champions as a matter of fact, and in Arcane you only saw maybe between 10 and 15 of them. So yes, you can play as Caitlyn, you can play as Vi, but you can play as many more champions that you never saw in the series, including a lot of characters from Piltover and Zone that are not in the Arcane show, but their story is intertwined with the likes of Heimerdinger, or Caitlyn, or Vi, or even Jinx. The game itself has no offline characteristics, it's a 5v5 that is totally online, and you play individual matches in which there are 10 people, divided in 2 teams, and each person controls only one character for the whole duration of the match. These matches don't have a set duration, but they tend to last between 25 and 40 minutes, but it can be more or less. The first thing we've got to start understanding if you want to play League is where it takes place. The map is called Summoner's Rift, and while there are other custom fun modes, this is the main map in which the real game is played. You will want to get familiar with this map because this is where you're always going to be playing. In this map we have a blue side and a red side, and the objective of the game is whoever takes the enemy team's base wins the game. There's no draws and there's only win or lose. There's a main building at the core of each base called the Nexus, and whoever takes the enemy team's Nexus will win the game. As you can see, the map is divided in 3 lanes. We will call them top lane, mid lane and bottom lane, although for short we just call them top, mid and bot. In between these lanes we also have what's called the jungle, and we will get into it later in this guide. In the lanes themselves we have structures called turrets, and these are very important because without killing the turrets we can't really get into the enemy's base. You see, the way the game works is that unless you kill a full lane of turrets, you cannot leak or even try to attack the enemy's nexus. So it is not necessary to take every single turret of the enemy team to win, but it is necessary to take at least one full lane of turrets to get to the nexus. This is where the fighting will start happening, because both players will contest in the lane, fighting each other over who will be able to push into the enemy tower. Of course, it's a bit more nuanced than that, but this is the basics. There is one more really important thing about the turrets and the map itself, and that is that this game is inspired by a tower defense game. And this is really important. If you've ever played any tower defense games, you will have enemies that come in what's called waves. So League is no different. The whole game revolves around the fact that every 30 seconds, each Nexus will spawn waves of what we call minions. These are tiny NPC characters that you will have to kill if you are the enemy team. So every 30 seconds there will be 6 minions spawning on each one of the lanes, which means every 30 seconds we will have 18 minions coming out of each nexus, 6 for each lane. There's a bit more nuance because every third wave you will have an extra one, but that doesn't matter right now. The thing about turrets is that they defend themselves. They will hit whatever is closer to them, assuming it's an enemy, of course, they won't hit allies. So if you ever try to take a tower by yourself, and even if you manage to kill the enemy and get to the tower will just start hitting you and you will die. So this is where the minions come into play. You see, the tower tends to focus the minions before focusing the champions. So the whole idea of League is that you gotta get to the tower, which we call pushing. When you move far up the lane, you want to push your minions into the enemy tower, and that's how you are able to actually damage the tower. Again, there's a bit more nuance than this. You don't want to always be constantly pushing, and this is one of the mistakes that new players make. But for the sake of simplicity, simply remember that getting your minions into the enemy tower is the only way you take towers, and taking towers is the only way you take the enemy nexus and thus win the game. Everything else is secondary, and the main objective of the game is taking a full lane worth of towers and getting into the enemy nexus. Fighting matters, but it's not the objective of the game. Remember, this is not a fighting game in which getting kills gives you the win like it would in a game like Super Smash Bros. That's not to say that fighting doesn't matter, it for sure does, it is just not the main objective of the game. So keep that in mind. So, what are the champions anyway? Now that we know about the map, let's talk a little bit about the characters. After that, we will talk about the roles of each character and why there were circles with letters in the map, but let's go one step at a time. First, there are 170-ish champions with different abilities each, and every time you play a game you have to select one champion and you will play that champion for the rest of the game. For example, we can select Caitlyn. Each one of these champions has 4 abilities and 1 passive ability that you cannot change or choose, they are just inherent to every different champion. They also have different stats from each other, which means every champion will fulfill a different type of archetype or class. In the example of Caitlyn, these abilities are used with a keyboard, so you will have Q, W, E, R to custom, and there's one of them, which is the R, that is considered your ultimate ability, which means it will have a longer cooldown and it will be a high impact ability that usually can turn the tide of a fight. To pilot your champion, you just do it with your mouse by right clicking where you want to go. And apart from this, every champion also has what's called the basic attack, we also call it auto attack, which means anytime you right click on something you will attack it and it doesn't really count as any of your abilities, it is just your basic way of hitting. Some champions like Caitlyn can auto attack from far away, whereas some champions like Vi will auto attack from close. Abilities have different cooldowns, different animations and different amount of damage on range, etc. as well as mana cost. So to give you the example of Caitlyn, her Q ability will just shoot a projectile forward, doing a lot of damage. The W ability will place a trap on the ground that will catch enemies if they step on it. It's also a cute cupcake. The E will throw a net and also make you jump backwards, which will slow an enemy upon hitting them, and also it will let you run away. And the ultimate is like a sniper shot from really long range that it will be an auto aim and hit whoever you aim it to. The passive is that every 5 auto attacks or shots of your sniper rifle, remember the right click, the 5th one will do more damage, which is called a headshot, and this is just specific to Caitlyn. There's a bit more nuance and interactions within the kit and ways of comboing, and I didn't mention a couple things, but these are the basics. Every champion will have different abilities and passives, okay? Let's talk about these letters and circles. The game has 5 defined roles that don't really change in any game, and in a team of 5 players there will always be a top laner, a mid laner, a jungler, a bottom laner, and a support. The bottom laner is also sometimes called ADC, which means AD carry. AD stands for attack damage, which is one type of damage, but it doesn't matter right now. So for example, Caitlyn is considered a bottom laner or an ADC. If we talk about the champions in League, each champion usually has one main role that is the role that they will play, but any champion can go to any role. It's just that the community consensus is that certain roles are not suited for certain champions, and while the game will let you play them in any role, if you do that you will get probably a lot of pushback from your team. For example, Caitlyn is an ADC slash bottom laner. So if you ever played her in the jungle, while you can do it, you will probably struggle because she's not designed to do so, and your team will probably get mad at you. One good tip is that if you go to the game client and you order the collection, click on show unowned and order them by most popular role, the game will tell you more or less which champions are usually played in which role. For example, we scroll all the way to bot lane, and we will find Caitlyn in the bot lane section. So let's talk about what each role does. The bot lane tends to be what we call ADCs, although sometimes you can bring mages there. And these are champions that are long range, usually have arrows, guns, things like this, like Caitlyn's gun or Jinx's gun. They are usually squishy and they are usually weak in the first stages of the game, but once you reach the later stages of the game, they tend to be more of a carry type. So they have range, but they are very vulnerable. They are your typical carries and marksmen. Since they are so vulnerable, we tend to send a support with them. So the support also goes bot lane, and these tend to be the healers, the pillars, and sometimes engage people that tank and want to start fights. Coming to the mid lane, these are the main characters of the map. Mid lane is in the center of the map, and as you can see, it's the shortest lane. That means that they usually can affect what happens around the map the most, and they tend to decide a lot of the pace of stuff in the game along with the jungler. Mid laners tend to be mages, although also we have assassins there. So things, if you like Arcane, someone like Victor will go mid lane. They also tend to be fairly long range champions, although sometimes you will bring short range champions to a mid lane, especially if they are assassins. Now in Arcane we didn't see any assassin type of character, but if you ever watched any of the cinematics, you probably have seen some mid laners such as Akali, Irelia, Zed, and some mages like Lux. Coming to a top lane is more like an island. Top laners tend to be bruisers, tanks, people with a lot of HP but not so much range, and people who will really love to stay in their own island and 1v1 each other. But also will do a lot of what we call split pushing, which means while there's stuff happening around the map, you focus on taking towers. So now let's talk about the jungle. This is the role that most new players find scary. So jungle is every area in between the lanes, and we will have the red team jungle and the blue team jungle. Basically, these are points that we call jungle camps, and there's 3 on each half of the jungle. So in total there are 6 jungle camps in the blue side and 6 jungle camps in the red side. Junglers usually will do 2 things. They will farm these jungle camps, and they are neutral camps, which means either of the 2 teams can kill them and get experience and gold, but just due to proximity, the blue jungler will farm the blue side camps and the red jungler will farm the red side camps. The second thing that junglers do, and this is the most important thing, is that they will do what's called ganking. You see, in League, units and players have only a certain amount of vision range, which is something you might have seen in RTS games like Age of Empires or StarCraft, and according to this vision range, if somebody is not showing in your team's vision range, then that enemy player will be simply hidden and you have no idea where he is. We call this lack of vision fog of war, which is the same as other games, and when the jungler comes out of the fog of war and assaults one of the lanes or ambushes, that's what we call ganking. For example, the blue team jungler might do the jungle camps and then come out of the fog of war in bot lane through the river, and this is ganking bot lane. This ambush is a way of getting kills, and a lot of the kills only happen because of the jungler ganking. But also he will take a lot of the blame for things going bad. It is very normal to see somebody getting solo killed or ganked in a lane and then blaming his own jungler for not being there and helping. As you can see, everything has its pros and cons. A lot of different classes can go to the jungle. There are tank junglers, there are assassin junglers, there are bruiser junglers like Vi, there's all kind of junglers. If you're playing in a lane and you're playing either top, mid or ADC, the main thing you gotta start doing is farming. You see, in the game your champion will start at level 1, and the maximum level you can get in a match is 18. Anytime you start a new match, you will start from level 1 again. Each time you level up, your champion will gain more stats, meaning it will become more tanky and do a bit more damage, and also you will get a skill point to level up one of your abilities. We also have gold. It is really important that you get minion last hits to get gold. So what is that? Well, it means that when a minion is low HP, an enemy team minion that is, you want to auto attack it or kill it with an ability, and that will give you gold. You will only get gold if you deal the killing blow to the minion, and it doesn't matter how many times you hit it, you just have to deal the killing blow and nothing else. You can't hit it earlier if you want, it just doesn't make a difference in terms of the gold that you get. For getting experience, however, you have to be close to a minion that's dying on the enemy team, but it doesn't matter whether you last hit it or not. So remember, killing blow gives you gold, but proximity gives you XP. So now that we have gold, what do we do with it? In the bottom of the screen you will have your inventory. Now, you might be used to other RPG games in which, for example, if you're an archer you have to buy a bow, because that will make it so that you deal more damage and your character will visually have that bow once you buy it, and you know, it will change the model. League is not like that. Items are just stats and sometimes passives, but they are not something that matters in terms of the visuals or the name of the item And just because you're playing a champion that has a bow, it doesn't mean you have to buy bow items, okay? So ignore the drawing and the visuals of the item. It's just an indicator, but it doesn't mean anything at all. The only thing that matters about items is their stats. So it is totally fine, for example, to buy an item that looks like a bow, even if you don't have a bow and you have a sword, because you're not actually equipping the item in the game. The items just give you stats and that's it, nothing else, okay? Sometimes they have some passives, but they don't really matter in terms of the visuals. Without items you can't play the game, and everything revolves around getting gold, XP and then items. You see, if you don't buy items during the game, it is the same as trying to play Counter-Strike or Call of Duty with just a knife. You will never win unless the enemy is completely trolling. So the goal of the game is pretty simple. You want to get a lot of resources, a lot of gold and XP, and get a lot of items with that. And with these things you want to be able to kill the enemy, to push your minions into the enemy tower, and thus finally get into the Nexus eventually. You can only buy items when you're in the base, so once in a while you will want to recall by pressing B, and go to the base to buy items and heal up and things like that. Think about recalling and going to base, sort of how race car goes to pits once in a while. One last thing that a lot of people will ask about is what are runes. So in the game client, before you start a match, there's something called runes, which are tiny passives and upgrades that you will get on your champion, and it's basically a skill tree that you can select to give you passives and stats before the game begins. I recommend not worrying about these too much early on, because when you're beginning the game they don't have that much impact yet. And also, there's a lot of apps and websites that just will tell you which ones are usually the best ones for your champion, at least 90+% of the time. So, one thing that a lot of people will mention, and you might want to know what it means, is what we call the meta. Meta is a word that we use in other games too, most efficient tactic available. What is the consensus as to what is the most viable strategies of each champion and role? For example, if you ask, is Caitlyn in the meta? What it means is, compared to all the other ADCs and bot laners, is Caitlyn a champion that is considered super good compared to all of them in the current patch? And when we say patch, the game gets updates every 2 weeks, which will change a bit of the champions. So if we say yes, Caitlyn is in the meta, it means Caitlyn is pretty strong in the current patch. If we say no, Caitlyn is a non-meta pick, we will say Caitlyn is kind of weak in the current patch. Also, if you ask, can I go jungle Caitlyn? The answer will be, well, that's not the meta, that's an off-meta pick. And if you ask, what's the build on Caitlyn? You will get an answer that will tell you what items and what runes are the usual meta or most efficient for Caitlyn. So when you're starting the game, if you're lost on the items and runes, you can download companion apps or Google for the meta of each champion, and that will tell you where that champion plays and what items and runes you should pick with that champion. I recommend doing this while you're still learning the game so that you don't have too many things on your plate at the same time. To conclude, the game is still thriving, and I don't think 2024 is too late to start. It is best to play the game for fun and not worry too much about the information overload at the start, for by having fun you'll actually learn without realizing. That said, try to not run before you walk. This means take the game one step at a time, trying to not rush. If you have any questions about the game or topic suggestions for Arcane or League videos, let me know. I will always be willing to answer in the comments if anything wasn't clear, and thank you a lot for watching, and I will see you in the next one.